I'll stand with the children against those who try to poison them with lead in their paint. Mr. President, I appreciate the courtesy of my colleagues in giving me the extra time, the distinguished senior senator from Delaware, the distinguished senator from Connecticut, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President, Senator from Delaware. Always happy to yield a little more time to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I just want to start off today. I hadn't planned to say this, but I just want to start off today. And I'm here to talk about small businesses and how to incentivize job creation and job preservation. But before I do that, I just want to take a moment, personal privilege, and just to talk about the Navy SEALs. I'm a retired Navy captain. Spent about 23 years of my life as a naval flight officer. Before that, I was a midshipman, Navy ROTC midshipman out of Ohio State. And we would do our summer tours as midshipmen, being trained to be junior naval officers. And one of our tours was down in Little Creek, where we learned a little bit about storming the beaches of Virginia and learned how to become Marines, or pretend that we were. We also, later on, as a Lieutenant J.G. I remember being out in Coronado before we went over to Southeast Asia and having a chance to see in both places, both at Little Creek Naval Station and over at on Coronado, North Island Naval Air Station, watch the SEALs train, Navy SEALs train. And I remember talking to some of my compadres who were going through the training with us and saying, well, we wouldn't want to mess with those guys. And for good reason. They have made us proud. They've taken on an incredibly difficult task, and I think handled themselves splendidly. And I just want to start off today to say how proud we are of them. I'm not quite as proud as, however, when it comes to one of our responsibilities, and that is the responsibility to provide a nurturing climate for job creation and job preservation. I talk a lot with small business folks, and I talk in my work with people who run pretty big businesses. And one of the things I've heard again and again, and not just this year, but last year and the year before, but large businesses make a fair amount of money these days, and a lot of them are sitting on a pile of cash. And when you ask them, well, why are you sitting on a pile of cash and not hiring people? What we hear from a lot of them is, well, businesses, particularly large businesses, but businesses like certainty, they like predictability. And in too many areas that we actually have something to do with, there's not the kind of predictability or certainty that those businesses need. For example, are we going to get serious about reducing our deficit? I hope so. And I think the Deficit Commission, led by Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson, gives a pretty good roadmap to take $4 trillion out of the deficit over the next 10 years. And I hope in the end that we'll use that as a roadmap, not to use it with precision, but to use it as a roadmap. That's a big uncertainty. Tax code. What are we going to do about our tax code? We're on a sort of a 2-year extension of the previous tax code, but that ends at the end of next year. What are we going to do about it? A lot of uncertainty there. We have worked long and hard to try to pass health care legislation that's designed not just to extend coverage to people who don't have it, but also designed to get us to better health care outcomes, to achieve better health care outcomes for less money, or at least better health care outcomes for the same amount of money. I mean, we have the prospect of the federal courts, a number of litigations that are underway around the country, of either at the Circuit Court of Appeals level or maybe someday at the Supreme Court level, taking apart pieces of the health care bill. And we need some certainty there. We need the courts to act. I'm not a lawyer, but some of my friends are, and some of them are a lot smarter than me on these things, suggest that as far as they're concerned, this meets constitutional muster. We just need an answer, and we need to get on with it. And to the extent we need to change health care legislation to fix it and make it better, then let's do that. But there's a lot in the legislation that enables us to get better results, better health care results for less money. We need to do more of what works. There's a lot of uncertainty with respect to transportation policy. We've on a series of extensions of transportation programs for this country. And the way it works, if you will, Mr. President, just looking at my podium here, we'll just say right here is the Transportation Trust Fund. And right here in the middle is the general fund for our country, our treasury, and over here is sources of capital from the rest of the world. We don't have enough money in our transportation trust fund over here to build transportation projects. We end up borrowing from the general fund right here, moving over to the transportation trust fund. Unfortunately, we don't have enough money in the general fund to run the government, so then we go overseas and we borrow money from everybody we can to replenish the general fund in order to put money in the transportation trust fund. It's crazy. And it's one of the reasons why we have a big budget deficit and we have uncertainty. We have been awarded our transportation system in this country has been awarded a grade D, as in Delta. Actually, a grade D is in decaying, because that's what's going on with our transportation system. I like to think if things are worth having, they're worth paying for, and we need to get on with it. But that's a source of uncertainty. And the last one is energy policy. So we see these run-ups in energy prices, price of fuel at the pump. People want to know, well, what are we going to do about it? Well, part of what we try to do it is to say we want more energy-efficient cars, trucks, and vans to be built in this country. We changed the CAFE legislation to raise the fuel efficiency standards for cars, trucks, and vans so that by 2016, the overall fleet average has to be 36 miles per gallon, a huge increase from where it has been since 1975. But that's being ramped up, and that'll help. But beyond that, we don't really have the kind of energy policy that we need. And that's another uncertainty. So those are five reasons why large businesses especially are sitting on a pile of cash and not hiring. And one of our obligations here is to address those uncertainties. My hope is we'll do it, and we've actually gotten off a pretty good start this year in a couple of ways. Number one, we passed FAA reauthorization, Federal Aviation Administration, and in doing so, we agreed on a revenue package, agreed to by the industry, to be able to modernize the air traffic control system. That's great. To be able to put some extra money toward airport construction. That's good as well. It's part of our infrastructure system. We've passed in the Senate here patent reform legislation. We'll say if the presiding officer from Montana were, and he's a very clever fellow, but if he invents, I think he's invented a product or technology, and he goes to the patent office under current law and files for a patent, I can come along even if I had nothing to do with that technology or that product, and I can say, you know, I had that idea first, and draw him into a lawsuit and maybe make it difficult for him to actually get his patent. And we changed that in this patent reform legislation. If he has the first one to file, then he's the first one to file. And a patent troll like me would not be able to get in the way and create mischief and simply maybe ultimately get bought out. And so the idea of changing that's I think very encouraging. We have a deficit reduction agreement for this fiscal year. We took about $40 billion or so out of our spending, and that's encouraging. And we have actually another piece of encouraging legislation that I think passed by unanimous consent in the last Congress on small businesses and how to help small businesses do more innovative research and how to help them ease their ability to do technology transfers. I think it passed by unanimous consent last year. And now, so far this year, we've been working on this legislation off and on since March, since the early part of March. And we've had a whole lot of amendments that have been offered to the bill. One of them from myself and Senator Vitter, Senator Coburn, and Senator McCaskill, and Senator Begich, and a bunch of other people that says it's not related to small businesses, but it's certainly related to the deficit. And what it does is, as the President mentioned in the State of the Union address, we have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of pieces of surplus property that the federal government owns that we're not using. We pay money to keep them secure. We pay money for their utilities, for their upkeep. We're not using them. We ought to sell them. We can't give them away. State and local governments or the homeless groups, we ought to sell them and at least get them off of our books. And that's going to be offered as an amendment to this small business bill, and my hope is that my colleagues will support it. Senator Landrieu, who chairs the Small Business Committee, and Senator Snowe, who's the ranking Republican, previously the chair, have worked on the underlying bill for something like 6 years. 6 years. It passed, again, I'll say, I'm pretty sure last year by unanimous consent. We need to get it done. We need to get it done. And my hope is that those of us who have amendments, especially those that are not controversial, will have an opportunity to offer our amendments to this bill. And then we need to move on. If you look at it's interesting. You look at small businesses. An inordinate number of scientists actually work for small businesses. Something like, I want to say, Mr. President, something like 40% of American scientists and engineers actually are employed by small businesses. And we've got some studies that show that the small business innovation research programs actually are responsible for something like 25% of our nation's crucial innovations over the past decade, and account for, again, something like 40% of America's patents. For us to be successful in the 21st century, we need to, the President likes to say, we need to out-educate, out-innovate, and out-compete the rest of the world. Part of what we need to do is to make sure that we're creating a world-class workforce, that we are producing a world-class infrastructure, and finally, we're making sure we're making research and development investments that will lead to products that can be commercialized, ideas, R&D that can be commercialized, turn into products that we can be making here in this country and selling around the world. I think if we can somehow figure out how to resolve our differences so that people who want to offer amendments, especially those that are not controversial, offer them to this bill. We'll debate them, or maybe they can just be accepted. The stuff that's really controversial, let's save it to another day. We probably agree on 80% of this stuff. My guess is we may disagree on 20%. The 20% we disagree on, this is what I call the NZ 80-20 rule, Senator NZ's 80-20 rule. The 80% we agree on, let's agree on it, put it in the bill, or the pending amendments. The 20% that we don't agree on, there's a fair amount of controversy, let's just work on it, save it, have additional hearings, and deal with that later on. But in the meantime, why don't we pass this bill? Why don't we make it easier for small businesses to get R&D money? Why don't we make it a little easier to be able to do technology transfers, in some cases, to nonprofits to develop new ideas? Why don't we help facilitate that and make that happen? And if we do that kind of thing, we want to encourage the American people, like this place isn't broken, and we actually can work together to get stuff done. And more importantly, we'll get stuff done. And we'll help small businesses to get stuff done. We'll help them make money. We'll enable them to hire more people. And in the end, some of those people and some of those businesses will actually pay more taxes, and that'll help drive down the deficit. That's a pretty good outcome. And it's one worth pursuing. I hope that we can in the days to come. I want to commend, in closing, Senator Landrieu. I want to commend Senator Snowe for working on this legislation for 6 years. And we just need to put that good work to the test, to the vote, and move on. Mr. President, thanks for giving me this time today, and I look forward to hearing the comments of our friend from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal. Thank you. I yield back the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the distinguished senator from Delaware for those very important and insightful comments, both on the Navy SEALs and on the small business legislation that's pending before this body. I want to begin, first of all, by saying I have 7 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders, and I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. As my colleague and the distinguished senator from Delaware has mentioned, over the last 36 or so hours, our nation and allies around the globe have rightly celebrated an extraordinary military triumph, a great victory in the war on terror, a turning point, perhaps, toward peace. Osama bin Laden, the heinous mastermind of the 9/11 attacks that murdered thousands of Americans, has been finally brought to justice, and we are rightly celebrating the extraordinary service, bravery, skill of the Navy SEALs, who were the tip of the spear, an American military that has brought to justice one of the criminals, one of the war criminals of our time. And we celebrate not only, of course, the Navy SEALs, but all of the men and women who have given their lives and their service over the past years, and their families. And we celebrate also the intellectual and intelligence community, the intellectual gifts that they have brought to bear, the intelligence that they have mobilized in support of this effort that were so crucial. Even as these celebrations have been conducted, on one small beach in Connecticut, this news has been greeted with solace and somber remembrance. It is the beach at Sherwood Island, where Connecticut is home to the living memorial for the Connecticut victims of 9/11, a memorial to the 152 victims of this tragedy, this murderous act by the man brought to justice. It is a beautiful place, exquisitely and heartbreakingly beautiful. The skyline of New York is visible from this point jutting out from Westport, the skyline of New York that could be seen in flames on the day of 9/11, the place that provided a staging area for many of the relief efforts that happened on that day and succeeding days. And now it is a place that the community of Westport, the state of Connecticut, and the world can remember that tragedy and the 152 people who lost their lives. It is also the place that every year Connecticut gathers to honor their memory, and the families, many of them, of those 152 victims come, as some of them did yesterday, with very mixed feelings, probably today. I know they are mixed feelings because I talked just a short while ago this morning with Lee Hansen, who is the father of Peter and his wife, Sue Kim, and their daughter, Christine, who lost their lives on that day. Lee and Eunice come to that place on the day that we recognize the Connecticut victims of 9/11 and many other days. And they felt deeply the ambivalence, the mixed feelings, the grief renewed again. On the memorial, a granite marker in Westport, there reads the following: "The citizens of Connecticut dedicate this living memorial to the thousands of innocent lives lost on September 11, 2001, and to the families who loved them." And today, while there are many voices who celebrate this victory, and rightly so, there are voices harder to hear, perhaps unheard. The victims and their families, whose memory I wish to honor today and ask to place in the record the names of those 152 men and women of Connecticut who died on September 11, 2001, as recorded on the memorial that honors their legacy in Sherwood Island. I ask that their names be placed in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. The lives of those families have been changed forever. Their children are young adults. Some of them have their own children now. Their lives have moved on. Some have remarried. And some have come to peace. But their lives, like the lives of the emergency responders who ran into the building, the firefighters and police, and their families, have been changed forever. The lives of our veterans who have fought and served and sacrificed in the war on terror have been changed forever. And we owe it to them never to forget, even as we celebrate this victory. We owe it to our veterans who have served and sacrificed to honor that service, not just in rhetoric, but in deed, and to make sure that we leave no veteran behind in education and jobs and health care, to provide for them what we have obligated and promised to provide. And while we hope for peace from this day forward, we must do everything we can to support the brave men and women who continue to serve in the war on terror that now continues, and those of our allies whose relentless service and sacrifice have helped us to win this victory. And my hope is that the memory of the victims of 9/11 will bring us together in a time of unity and purpose, just as that heinous act did on that day almost 10 years ago. The heinous, brutal murder of September 11, 2001 hit the World Trade Center and they hit the Pentagon, but they missed America, as was remarked at the time. They missed what makes America great, and they brought us together in a time that we can remember with pride, because it was a time of resolve and unity. And I hope that the memory of those victims, the 152 from Connecticut and thousands more from around the country, as well as their families, can bring us together now in a renewed sense of unity and purpose to face the challenges that lie ahead. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Senate in a quorum call.
Yes, it is.
I ask consent, the unanimous consent that be vitiated.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent at 2:15 p.m. today, the Senate proceed to the consideration of Res 159, which is at the desk, that there be up to 75 minutes of debate on the resolution equally divided between the two leaders or the designees prior to vote on the adoption of the resolution, with the final 10 minutes reserved for the two leaders, with the Republican leader controlling 5 minutes and the majority leader controlling the final 5 minutes. Further, that upon disposition of the resolution, the preamble be agreed to. There be no amendments in order to either the resolution or the preamble. And that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. The Senate then proceed to a period of morning business for debate only until 5 p.m. with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, with this agreement, the vote on adoption of the resolution will occur at 3:30 p.m. today. I encourage senators to vote from their desk. Senator McConnell and I have talked. This is an important resolution. I would ask everyone to be in their seats 10 minutes before 3:30 so that we can vote at 3:30 in a dignified manner on this most important resolution.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands in recess until 2:15 p.m.
So as you heard, senators have recessed for their weekly party lunch meetings. They'll return at 2:15 Eastern to